Imperva, a Thales company, is the cybersecurity leader that helps organizations protect critical applications, APIs, and data anywhere, at scale, and with the highest ROI. With an integrated approach combining edge, application security, and data security, Imperva protects companies through all stages of their digital journey. Imperva Threat Research and their global intelligence community enable Imperva to stay ahead of the threat landscape and seamlessly integrate the latest security, privacy, and compliance expertise into their solutions. Start a free trial today at securityweekly.com/Imperva.
Make sure you subscribe to the Below the Surface podcast by Eclipsium in partnership with CRA. We've had the pleasure of speaking with some amazing guests, including Zeno Kova, Richard Hughes, Vincent Zimmer, and more. We discuss topics related to firmware and supply chain security, uncovering those pesky vulnerabilities that lie, well, below the surface in your environments. You can find all the episodes and subscribe by visiting eclipsium.com/podcast or searching for Below the Surface in your favorite podcast catcher.
Welcome back, and thank you for continuing with us as we cover Black Hat 2024. I am Mandy Logan with Security Weekly and Cyber Risk Alliance, and here with me is Boaz Barzel, the Technical Evangelist and Director of Enablement at Ox Security. Boaz, thank you. Oh, you're so welcome. You're very, very welcome.
Yeah.
So today we want to focus on AppSec, right? This is what you have gotten. It was what Ox Security has gotten all their fingers into and is really interested in helping. And this is becoming increasingly important. I am curious first about you're discussing navigating the path to maturity for AppSec.
Right.
Can you give a quick summary of like what the state was and where it is going on maturity for AppSec in general?
It's a good question. Really, from a maturity standpoint, what we were seeing in the past is a lot more focus on discovery and bringing tools to help us discover security issues, vulnerabilities within the code. As if we even go further back, application security was mostly around applications that are actually running. There were little aspects of code analysis.
Okay.
But today, with all the development increase, agile methodologies, we're seeing that companies are shifting their gaze more to the code, to what's coming into the application. And now that developers are releasing code on a weekly, sometimes even daily basis, we see that it becomes very challenging just to have those vulnerabilities listed for you.
Okay.
So from this perspective, what we're seeing is that now the next area of maturity for most companies is generating context, not just the ability to create coverage, but also the visibility and context to help them prioritize in an automated way, and not spending days or week just manually going through the vulnerabilities, trying to decide which one of them is critical. How many hours do I can get from development to remediate and fix vulnerabilities? So I think this is really the next level where we're going to see Ox Security, for example, as providing that level of prioritization, consolidation, and really giving you those critical security issues that once developers fix, they fix the root cause, and then behind the scene actually fixes a lot more vulnerabilities.
Okay.
So this is kind of the next level of evolution for most companies, and companies that already have that are building their automated response protocols that you can also, of course, do with Ox.
So in that, are you telling me that the advances in maturity actually are part of a move towards secure by design?
That's a good framework to use.
Okay.
There's a few more that you can use, but eventually, yes, we want to have a framework that helps us understand everything from the design phases through where development are writing the code, choosing what open source to use, for example. Maybe we can write different types of modules that help sanitize input, for example. So if there is a vulnerability, we're already mitigating that even before starting to code the application. The problem is that today applications are build a lot of services. So micro pieces that are building a whole application in contrast to how it was built previously. So it's really it's different, but it's difficult. And the complexity of it means that just using a framework, that's probably good, but companies already have so many security issues and vulnerabilities, and their backlog is huge. And it's a risk they already have right now. So using a framework, like Secure by Design or Salsa or NIST or any one of those will help in the long run, but the focus should really be in understanding their current posture and focusing on the risks and vulnerabilities that they need to fix. And one of those, frameworks that can use is Oscar as an example. Oscar really takes the maturity to the next level with application detection and response, converging into that space of application security testing, software supply chain security, and ASPM. And when you put everything together, you finally get a real picture of how exposed you are, what of not just the critical areas to fix, but also how attackers are looking at your vulnerabilities and what they can do. And then you can start understanding really the current security posture, start handling that, eliminate the manual AppSec through, for example, no-code workflows that we're providing. And then you have time to start looking at strategic programs and long-term programs, implementing those frameworks to start reducing the future risk.
Which I think is what we all want.
Yes.
Right? We want to have the Minority Report ability to predict and handle it ahead of time.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good reference.
So, and going back to Oscar, I want to confirm that is the open software supply chain attack reference.
Exactly.
Right? And in your experience with Ox so far, when you're looking at the industry, what percentage of organizations either have a dedicated AppSec person or team, or do they not need it? Like, how many organizations really don't have to deal with AppSec?
I don't think there is an organization, maybe 5%, that don't develop software. Software is what everybody's doing. You can see even manufacturers that, the big companies, shoe companies, car companies, they're all software companies eventually. And a lot of what they do relies on that software. Even their own optimizations and internal processes is software based. So I would say almost every company in the world right now develops software. Because they're developing software, they're now turning their gaze into application security. We're seeing more and more companies having that position in the organization, and even other types of positions that are complementary. You can see product security coming from development side in a lot of cases. You see DevOps and DevSecOps integrating security into the different areas of the pipeline. So you're starting, and we're seeing that today, and the market is growing exponentially. All the statistics, all the reports indicate that it's phenomenal. And this is why we're seeing that once we got network security, endpoint, cloud, it's already a commodity. Now they're looking and shifting their gaze even more to the code, and they want to fix something before it gets to be deployed, because if it's deployed, they're already at risk. So I would say more than 90% of the companies have an AppSec position in the organization. More than 50% have an actual, it's more than budget line. It's part of their risk. Their top 5 risk elements that the board are looking at are, application security is one of them.
And what are some of the biggest challenges facing application security?
It's a good question. I would say the biggest challenge today is the manual AppSec practices, that you have to do a lot of the analysis and response manually. Discovery, we already probably took care of it, but then the outputs, the visibility elements, understanding and analyzing vulnerabilities, who's the owner, who should I approach, how do I fix it, is it really critical for me, what's the effect on the business, what's the effect on the environment, collecting that context. The entire thing, the cause of it is that I need to do it manually. If I don't need to do it manually, then I can just skip to the next stage, which is the response. if I already got the response covered, now that's a big thing, because this is where companies can leapfrog years ahead, which wasn't the case, for example, in IT security, where we had to go through antiviruses and firewalls and then IPS and all the rest, collect it into a SIEM. We got the visibility, but still a lot of issues. Then we got EDR, XDR, all those areas. And one of the special things about Ox, we understood it from day one, and we've built it kind of the next generation. So we're leapfrogging into SIEM and XDR really quickly. We don't have to go through all the stages. So at this point, I would say that understanding the context of the environment, your business, the attack surface, connecting all the dots together, and providing really those few security issues that you need to fix at any given time. This, I would say, this is the main area of focus and a challenge for a lot of companies.
Absolutely. And I'm curious your take on, for the C-suite, for the executives that aren't in the daily grind of, oh, these application security processes are manually done right now. Is it fair to say to them that maturing their application security practices is dependent upon eliminating the manual processes? Or what are the other items that Ox zeroes in on as allowing maturity to come in?
So the first item is really to understand how much time does it take to fix an issue. And it starts by, when we are discovering vulnerabilities, how much time do we spend on tasks analyzing those vulnerabilities? What's the end goal? Trying to measure the friction between the security and development teams. This is also something, it's difficult. One idea that I liked, which really got a financial company huge advancements in that remediation, is they started to gamify, so create a gamification on the development teams.
Really?
On how, it's amazing. It really is amazing. And that gamification provided scores for the different engineering teams.
Okay.
And eventually they got the managers of those teams. One of their KPIs, or part of their KPIs they get bonuses on, is to be on a B or an A score.
Really?
And they were actually able to gain more traction from development to fix security issues. He told me that they were working weekends just to be the top, really get to be an A position.
Yeah.
And they started bragging about it. So I think this is one of the ideas that, you can do as a CISO or a C-suite in order to get people motivated into reducing basically it's your security cost, security risk, I would say. So,
and I want to go back to that line because many times application security is handled differently than other security programs or development by the mere fact that the security is thrown back on the developers.
Right.
And that's different. That is right. I mean,
exactly.
Will you speak on that in your experience? That's a very different mindset, that you're throwing the security requirements on the developers who it's not necessarily what they thought they were there to do.
This is a great point, because this is one of the major differences between, I would say, application security and the rest of the security spaces, where the control remediation is at the hands of the security team. Here, the remediation eventually is on the development team. Security people can't remediate. They see the vulnerabilities, they prioritize them, they send it for developers to remediate. But eventually a developer will look at the code and say, okay, this code works. I need to finish my next task because there's another task afterwards. And we promised a customer that we release this software and so on and so forth. I don't have time to fix security vulnerabilities. And I feel that this is really challenging as well right now, as you're mentioning, but also something that separates application security from the other security markets and requires a different types of approach in that sense. So I would say, a
A lot of
continuous approach.
gamification. What you're saying is
Gamification, yeah, but also a continuous approach. I can't come to a developer with a vulnerability I spent days or weeks to analyze, and then that developer will say, well, we'll already fix that, or we've changed that, we're not using that library anymore.
right.
So it has to be a continuous approach, it has to be real time. And I feel this is something that a lot of Ox's customers are enjoying today, as they're getting that information in real time. As developers adding new components to the code, they see that, they understand the criticality of that immediately, and they can give something for them to fix in the development phases and not later on where we're just about to release and I can stall the release. So I'm deciding on releasing with the risk, with everything, and I'm going to fix it next release.
Fair. So, in summary, what is information you can provide to our audience about how Ox really helps the application security posture of a company? Since we discussed, you're saying 95% of companies, no matter what industry they are in,
Yes.
are also in application security. What does Ox do?
So the first thing that Ox helps to do is to eliminate manual AppSec practices.
Okay.
And what we're seeing is that the ability to provide the coverage on the entire pipeline in a single platform, collect the information, correlate it, consolidate it, understand the context of how the business operates, the development operates, the attack landscape, use Oscar and application detection and response. You can connect different tools, not just Ox's native tools. And the first thing it gives you a complete visibility on the actual risk, what are really critical aspects, and
Oh, wow.
also the guided remediation. What do I do next? So technically speaking, when I build a no-code workflow, I can start responding to security issues without spending a lot of time analyzing them, opening tickets, and chasing developers. I'm also recommending a lot of organizations to, once they, for example, implement Ox, they start thinking strategically because the daily tasks are covered.
Okay.
And the evidence is there. So they don't have to continuously prove to development why it's important. We're showing we have a reachability graph, exploitability, and all of that. The next part is really thinking about how do I look at a next application I'm going to develop. What's the security elements? Plug it into Ox. Of course, we'll see it automatically. And through the development, we're starting to analyze everything. So as you're developing the application, even before it released, you understand what's the expected criticality of specific elements. We are also deprioritizing a lot of elements. So we're creating a cleaner view, reducing a lot of the noise and aspects. And eventually, we're allowing the security team to start focusing on those strategic aspects, building frameworks that will create a better ROI for the business. And what we're seeing a lot with companies that we work with is that every time you integrate security into the pipeline, there is a reduction in the velocity of development. With Ox, that reduction is almost non-existent. And then the development growth is actually faster than what they're expecting. So we're seeing Ox as a business catalyst and helping a lot of businesses that use Ox to actually expedite their application, reduce the risk, and eventually become more competitive in the market.
And that's not just on the initial offering or the initial release, but also on subsequent releases,
Exactly.
right?
So it's a continuous over time, and you're releasing on a daily basis, and you want to know exactly what I'm releasing, the kind of risk it creates, and if something needs to be, held, then I want to know as soon as possible and not at the end of the process or after it was released. For example, we're able to correlate a lot of the container issues to code issues.
Okay.
So we immediately know when a container is built. Of course, we'll see it in code, but we'll see it also in a container, and then automatically linked it to the relevant person. A ticket will open, they'll fix it, they'll build a new container, and that's it. So it's really amazing that the path that we can take here.
It does. It sounds like a lot of streamlining.
Yes.
Yes. Beautiful. Boaz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So to continue with us today, you will be able to see our closing for Black Hat. And to find out more about Aux Security, please visit securityweekly.com/AuxSecurityBH. If you can't stick around for the rest of the live stream, or if you are catching this afterwards, please head over to securityweekly.com/Black Hat to find all of the Black Hat coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance. Thank you for sticking with us for our ongoing coverage from Black Hat 2024. I am Mandy on behalf of Security Weekly and Cyber Risk Alliance, or CRA-TV. I am joined now by Shimon Modi, the Vice President of Product Management at DataMiner. Shimon, thank you so much for being here.
Mandy, thank you for having me.
So I am very excited because even though we hear consistently around Black Hat and at other conferences about AI, I am actually very excited to discuss your viewpoint and the data miner push toward using publicly available data to create a more resilient cyber structure for your customers and across the board for all cyber threats. In fact, I think what we were just going to discuss is AI to the rescue. Now, do you mean that AI is okay, it's all done and fine, everything is wonderful, and we can turn security operations over to AI?
Absolutely not, right? We haven't gotten to that point yet. I don't think we'll get to that point anytime soon. When we talk about AI to the rescue, there are two sides to the coin, right? AI is such a disruptive technology. It can be used just as effectively by the adversaries as it can be by the defenders. And when we talk about AI to the rescue, it's really thinking about it in a very thoughtful way. What can AI do to really lessen the burden that today's security professionals are under so that they can stay on top of everything that is coming at their organization, that is coming at their attack surface. And so when we really think about AI to the rescue, it really is from the perspective of how do we help human analysts get through some complex analytical processes with an increasing volume of information that they just have to process, and they just cannot do that. It's just not humanly possible.
Absolutely not. But so you're telling me that you and data miner actually care about the humans that are doing this stuff?
We absolutely do, and we do also recognize that humans will always be part of the solution. We don't think of AI as a silver bullet. AI is not going to replace humans. Artificial intelligence is supposed to be, in my opinion, and as we are seeing the space evolve, a way for humans to actually do higher order analytical work, right? And I've been in the cyberspace for the last 25 years, but the last 15 have been building products that focus on human analysts that are doing a lot of drudge work, all the way from threat intelligence to threat detection to investigations, remediations. And my passion point has always been around how do we help these humans do the higher order analytical work so that machines can do some of the things that are just repeatable, or humans are just not capable of doing at a volume and scale.
Correct. So on a side note, is there something then that you're particularly excited about seeing happen within security teams because of effective use of AI?
Absolutely. And to take a step back, right? Data miners' mission is to help security teams take faster actions against emerging risks and threats using publicly available information.
Okay.
Because we recognize there's a lot of signal available beyond an enterprise's four walls. There's just a plethora of information available out there, right? For a human analyst to be able to harness that so that they can take faster action is important. Time matters, seconds matter, both from a physical standpoint as well as a cyber standpoint. And so to be able to detect these events that are happening in the public domain, recognize its relevance, deliver it to the appropriate organization with the appropriate context so that the analyst can take the appropriate mitigative action is core to data miners' mission.
That's fantastic. And I'm thinking like, so with the focus on using data from disparate public storehouses, or, the way that it is being aggregated and being able to use that, are you telling me that data miners' ability to take those trillions of points of data can apply not only to things like natural disasters, but also what threat actors are currently doing?
Absolutely. And when we think about public sources, there's a spectrum,
Okay.
There's a spectrum all the way from human-generated information that you can find on social media, that you can find on Telegram channels, that you can find on the deep and dark web, all publicly available. You may need special infrastructure to get to it, but if you have it, you can actually get to it. But then on the other side of the spectrum is machine-generated data. You have internet scanners that are generating large volumes of information, all machine-generated, machine-readable. You also have sensor networks and then code repositories. Again, publicly available, but machine readable. And so when we think about public sources, it spans this entire spectrum of human generated to machine generated, surface web to deep and dark web, and everything in between. And for us, AI has a very important role to play so that we can extract the right signals from all this information. And we generally think about AI playing a role in this across three main layers, right? At its very core, it's all about how do you detect the signal and classify it so that you can say, this is a physical risk or this is a cyber risk. Okay. Is this a fire or is this a ransomware attack? Is this leaked credentials? So really being able to do that at scale across millions of data points, trillions of computations, that's where a lot of the power of what we do from an AI perspective comes in. But then on top of that, as I was describing, there's human-generated information that we look at that the platform consumes. Telegram channels, it's a discussion between threat actors. They are either doing a transaction, trying to figure out what kind of a campaign they want to launch. It's a blurb, right? Now, for an analyst to kind of read through it and try and extract the relevant information, that is analytical work that should be automated. And so that's where we use generative AI to create the lead, figure out what is relevant, who are the threat actors, how does this matter to you as an organization, and create that human readable caption so that they can get the right context at the right time. And something that we are very, very excited about now with some of the AI innovations that have come out in the last couple of years has been around how do you bring about stitching together this evolving time frame, this fabric of signals that you have into a live brief. Because again, that's what analysts want. Whenever there is some kind of an event, guess what happens? 10 tabs open up, you start tracking. What is the current event? What is its impact? And with every new information that you have with passing time, what is going to be the updated context behind it? And so again, AI has a role to play in bringing this context to the analyst so that they can then either modify, update, or double down on whatever the risk mitigation strategy they're following.
Which is extremely exciting, especially when you're the analyst or you're in the SOC and you're looking at it, being able to go, oh, wow, I can spring to action now. Way more interesting than having to continue to search through all of the signals, all the information. And I am very interested because using the public data in different, not just use cases, but actually taking information from whether it was text or image or video or audio. I am so intrigued by how does each format play into giving actionable information to security teams. And I was curious if you would give an example, like how does an image data relate to extremely helpful information to the security organization?
Absolutely, and that's a fantastic question. And if we take a step back and think about all of those signals in an atomic sense, then it becomes a fragmented reality.
Right.
And what we have done from a data miner perspective is to really think about it from a multimodal fusion perspective and to make it real with an example. Ransomware attacks are just starting to increase, right? They're all financially motivated. So guess what they do? Break in, it's a smash and grab. Get in, get the data, put it up on their ransomware leak site, start their eBay clock, their clock, and say, within the next 24 hours, if you don't pay up, all this data is going to go into the public domain. Well, when they first go do that, guess what happens? They put up a screenshot of some data to show evidence that they actually have it. Then they may mention the name of the company. That might be a mention of a name, or it may not be the exact name of the company, or they may even use the logo of the company.
Okay.
Right? So now you have an image and giving you evidence of the data. You have a logo of the company that is the victim, and it may be in a language that is not English. It may be in a foreign
Fair.
language.
Fair.
And now you have this tapestry of signals across images, you have logo, computer vision, you have a different language, bringing it all together so that now you can deliver this unified risk event to the analyst is a game changer, right? That is where we see the multimodal aspect of this really come together. Now, from an audio and a video perspective, as the threat landscape evolves, I'm sure there'll be signals available for cyber perspective from those. But today we see a lot of the implications of audio and video really driving physical risk detection for us.
Nice. So am I understanding this correctly, that with using the data from, say, images, like you were giving the example of the ransomware screenshot that is sent, the logo that is used, it is more looking at the surface value of the data presented and not something such as steganography, like something else hidden in the imaging?
Absolutely. When we think about extracting these signals, is from the perspective of there's a threat actor that is putting out evidence to show that this is a real attack, and how can we help the analysts, the defenders, harness this signal so that they can then decide what should be their next course of action.
Okay. So with that and what you've seen so far from research development, from your product teams, what you're getting from customers, and all the information I'm sure you take in all the time on the industry, what trends do you think organizations should be zeroed in on for the next 12 to 24 months?
It is a fascinating space out there. I'd be remiss if I didn't say AI is a threat, right?
Yes.
But now that we have
Bad actors are a threat.
Bad actors are a threat.
And they like to be lazy, so of course they're going to jump into this, right?
But now that we have said AI is a threat, let's actually move on to what is really happening out there. Right. So given the data miner solution that we have a very unique vantage point in terms of all the kind of activity that we see in the public domain. Okay. And we look at ransomware attacks, we look at leak credentials, we look at domain impersonations, we look at phishing attempts, we see fraud and scams. But these individually are just a type of threat activity. There are two big trends that we are starting to see as it relates to the cyber threat landscape, and what we see CISOs and our customers really starting to gravitate towards. One is the cyber criminal organization. That ecosystem is really coming to the forefront, right? So when you think about a ransomware attack, it's financially motivated. They want something in return that is of financial value. So you see data breaches happen. To actually do a data breach, though, you need to be able to get credentials. So now information access brokers are starting to become more and more popular.
Absolutely.
Well, how do information access brokers get some of the leak credentials? They set up phishing campaigns, they do domain impersonation, they create fake login screens. And so there's this attack chain all the way through. But that is an ecosystem. And thinking about it from an ecosystem versus individual attack patterns is something that we are starting to see CISOs really gravitate towards. And the second thing that we are seeing is not just the attacks, but who are the attacks targeted at? Mm-hmm. So increasingly, these kind of attacks, especially ransomware attacks or even leak credential type of attacks, which eventually do lead to ransomware and data breaches, we see those increasingly being targeted towards third parties of organizations versus the organization itself.
Okay.
So as in Target happened 10 years ago, that playbook was written. But what we are seeing out there is threat actors have essentially updated that playbook, and they're essentially going after third parties with these tactics. Because once they go after a third party, if they get leaked credentials from a third party, they could then try and actually get access to the organization that they care about. And so increasingly we are seeing this. And in fact, even if you look at Gartner's big report, third-party risk is among the top 3 concerns for CISOs. If you look at the Verizon DBIR for this year, they actually had a special section on data breaches that targeted third parties. So it is clearly becoming a top of mind concern. And so those are kind of like the kind of two big trends, right? Financially motivated actions, data breaches, leak credentials, but then being extremely targeted at third parties.
Which obviously is paying off consistently. And I remember recently in research I was doing about cybercrime as a whole. I apologize, I can't remember to give correct attribution, but the research found that if cybercrime around the world was ranked as a nation, then it would have the third highest GDP or revenue of any nation in the world. Obviously, it's being extremely effective.
It is very effective. If you think about the GDP per capita, that it really changes the dynamic on it, right? It is becoming increasingly rampant, and part of the reason why we see them being so successful is third parties are just hard to monitor for.
Oh, yeah.
It is hard enough to monitor your own organization. Now, can you imagine trying to extend your own detection capabilities to a third party? But they are part of your attack surface. But the only thing that you can really do right now is rely on vendor questionnaires or some kind of security ratings, which happen
Right.
every so often. But as part of your
And you're talking about, right. Then you're talking about lag. You're talking about such
absolutely
historic data almost that in the moment is not going to be very helpful for the team who is trying to figure out what is their cyber resiliency program at this second based on what's coming.
exactly.
So what do you feel that we as an industry or from data miners help can really help keep pace, given that there is still a knowledgeable practitioner shortage?
Yeah, it is. It's a very complex question, a complex answer. It's like a PhD thesis, right? It takes me back to my academia days. But it is a multi-layered answer, and I'll kind of focus on two main elements of it, right? It is very holistic. There's many different perspectives, but I believe there's two things that everyone should be thinking about. One is just the hygiene basics.
Okay.
Make sure you do the basics right. Make sure you have effective user training. Users are part of the problem, but they're also part of the solution, right? I don't know if you saw the latest deepfake attack that was targeted at a Ferrari executive. It was reported last week, where one of the top-ranking execs at Ferrari got a deepfake call.
Okay.
Pretending to be the CEO. At first, he kind of fell for it, but then he thought there was something fishy, and then he basically asked the person who was pretending, or the deepfake, hey, what was the book that you just recently asked me to read?
Oh, that's smart, right?
Simple. It's
Smart, yeah.
simple, but those are the kind of things that we can start thinking about, which are just basic in its nature, but it brings the user into the solution. But then on the flip side, if you start thinking about the technology component of it, AI definitely has a role to play in a very thoughtful way. How do we bring AI to bear upon the massive data challenge that we have, as well as the complex human and analytical challenge that we have? How do we relieve the drudgery? How do we
Sure.
relieve some of the work that analysts have to do today, which should be automated, which should be augmented by AI? And that's where data miner really focuses on solving that problem from a public data standpoint. There's just too much data out there. There are relevant signals that are buried in the public data. How do we use AI in a way that delivers the right signals to the right people at the right time?
Wow, I've really appreciated this. Thank you so much for joining me. And to our audience, please, if you will go ahead and visit securityweekly.com/dataminerbh, you can get more information about Data Miner. And then to get all information on the Black Hat coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please go to securityweekly.com/Black Hat. And thank you for joining.